Transform Kenya. Empower our nation.
A very good evening to you from wherever you're watching. Welcome to this special edition of Transform Kenya, where we're discussing gender-based violence during this 16 days of activism. This is a joint Standard Group and UNFPA partnership. We also have in our presence our CEO of Standard Group, Orlando Liomo, and also we have former CAS of Ministry of ICT, that is Nadia Ahmed, among other stakeholders. It is definitely going to be a very interesting conversation here on gender-based violence and how to end it. Of course, the panelists that I have here include Anders Thompson, who is a UNFPA representative. We also have Jacqueline Jaggi. She is the head of SGBV Division, Office of the Director of Public Prosecution. We also have Josphat Ireri, who is the Program Director of Kenya, between the Kenya-Finland Bilateral Program on Gender-Based Violence. And finally, we have Wangeshi Washira, who is the Executive Director of CREW. Now, I want us to just start off by listening to a bite from the CS of Public Service, Gender and Affirmative Action, Aisha Jumwa. Let's listen to that bite that she had there, of course, talking about gender, the GBV there in Kilifi County. Let's listen in.
In order to understand the magnitude of the impact of GBV in our country, GBV costs our economy in excess of 46 billion Kenya shillings annually, including the cost of healthcare, legal services, transport costs to survivors and families, and lost economic opportunities from injury and death, among other costs. This is money that could otherwise be channeled to promotion of comprehensive health services. And this underlines the importance of prevention of GBV as the first line of action, given the enormous economic burden to our nation and other diverse effects on Kenyans. The theme of the 16 Days of Activism campaign for 2022, Unite, Activism to End Violence Against Women and Girls, is appropriate, and the campaign objectives, which are already articulated, highlight the key actions required to accelerate the elimination of gender-based violence as follows. 1. To engage communities in activities and events to raise awareness in the prevention and response to GBV. 2. To mobilize state and non-state actors in the prevention of violence against women, to stand in solidarity on women's rights and calling for a society free from GBV. 3. To engage Generation Equality Forum commitment makers in our country to collaborate in the implementation of the 12 commitments to inspire action and deliver progress on the GBV Action Coalition Blueprint. To popularize and localize GEF commitments at the county level. To call for greater support, increase long-term, sustainable and flexible funding from actors at both national and county level to end violence against women, girls in all their diversity.
Right, thank you so much for that. Of course, my name is Fatia Mohammed Noor. Of course, we're going to have a very interesting conversation here, but first I want us to watch a documentary on gender-based violence. Let's take a look.
I appeal to all our social institutions, including our religious institutions, to exercise civic responsibility to bring these unfortunate trends to an end.
Women and girls are vulnerable. Gender-based violence is not negotiable.
We also need to do our part.
Majority of men are perpetrators of violence.
I believe if we prioritized fight against violence, it will be the thing of the past.
So therefore, also to fortify our protection of the family as the foundation of the state, I also further direct and order the National Crime Research Center to probe 3 issues. First is the escalating cases of gender-based violence. The second is the worrying trend of cases where the girl child has been disempowered. And the third is the violation of children's rights.
Gender-based violence, GBV, is an umbrella term for any harmful act that is perpetrated against a person's will and that is based on socially attributed differences between males and females. The forms of GBV include physical assault, psychological torture, intimate partner violence, sodomy, rape, defilement, female genital mutilation (FGM), and child marriage, among others. Generation Equality. Generation Equality Forum is a global, innovative, multi-stakeholder platform made of action coalitions to accelerate the implementation of the PACE for Gender Equality commitments made in Beijing in 1995 in order to achieve transformative change. The State Department for Gender has been participating in the Action Coalition's leaders' meetings at the global level being convened by UN Women.
Kenya was selected to be one of the co-leaders of the Gender-Based Violence Action Coalition. This is a priority issue for us, specifically around the issues of female genital mutilation, but also taking into account all other forms of gender-based violence. Kenyan government is very happy to launch the Generation Equality Forum. When we come to implementation, we have a multi-agency so that we can be able to look at all challenges that women and girls face as they try to get empowered towards gender equality.
The State Department, in partnership with Healthcare Assistance Kenya, HARC, is operating a national GBV toll-free helpline 1195 to provide immediate assistance to survivors through telecounseling and referrals for medical and legal services.
Every step they go, we work with them.
Tulipiga hiyo 1195, walituambia watatushika mkono, watatusaidia sana, ndio wakanileta kwa hiyo safe house, wakaniambia nikaa huko for the remaining time, ndio wananisaidia, ndio jumuiya nashughulikia kesi yangu kwa milimani.
Right, of course, that documentary just setting pace on what is gender-based violence, and of course, there's also the national hotline number there being 1195. But I just want us to start the conversation now with my panelists here. Thank you so much, all of you, for joining us. To start off, of course, gender-based violence occurs everywhere in the world, but as you know, it's hard sometimes to gauge the extent of the problem because there's stigma, there's secrecy in telling this kind of stories. So how prevalent is gender-based violence in the country, and who are the most affected? Let's start with you, Thompson.
Yeah, thank you very much. I mean, of course, we have all these statistics and so on, and when we send out surveys, not everyone is truthful and telling the real story. And of course, gender-based violence covers domestic violence, FGM, and also sexual violence, which we have talked about today. But let me just pick on one number. Of all women who are reporting in the surveys in Kenya that they have experienced sexual violence in their lifetime is 1.7 million. Let me paint a picture. If we allow 1 meter for each woman, so they form a human chain and they hold hands, how long is that chain of women survivors? It will actually take you 1,700 kilometers. So it's enough to form a chain all the way from Mombasa up to Kisumu and back again. And you can look everyone in the eyes as you get to Kisumu and turn around and look everyone in the eyes on the other side of the road as you come back. It's a very, very large amount of women.
Yes, of course, just the way you've explained it. Jacqueline, what then, in your opinion, do you think is the extent of gender-based violence in the country?
Thank you very much, and thank you for inviting me. Just to mention what my colleague has said, if you sit in this room today and count every third woman has gone through gender-based violence. So if you count every 3 women, the third one has gone through gender-based violence. So it's really widespread and not spoken about. So yes, we do have. And like my colleague has said, about 1.7 million. I believe that is also an underestimation. Those are the ones who have reported. What about the ones who have not reported?
Right.
Yes.
Of course, about the ones who have not reported, you know, because of stigma and the secrecy that is there in gender-based violence, the numbers are not exactly as they are. But just coming to you, then, what is your opinion, you know, from where you sit?
I want to agree that gender-based violence is very widespread in our country, and is informed by many factors. You can consider that 41% of women have reported having suffered gender-based violence in their lifetimes in Kenya. So just to corroborate what has been said, it is extensive.
Well, Wangeshi, what about you? What are your thoughts on it?
I think just like the panelists here have highlighted, gender-based violence is happening. And I think for me, we should just be concerned if one woman in every part of where we are is being violated. I think even beyond the data that we have, and the data is speaking for itself. As an organization, for example, in a month we receive more than 200 women who call on our toll-free line looking for help. Our partner organizations, for example, like FIDA, they from 2020 to August have also highlighted about 12,000 women who called looking for legal support, looking for psychosocial support. And this data also goes ahead to also be able to highlight, when you look at our national Kenya Demographic Health Survey, has also highlighted 1 out of 3 women have gone through violence. I think that's something that should call us to action. It's something that calls us to do something, because if our women are going through violence, and when I talk about here is about women who are young women. We are talking about young girls who are also vulnerable. We have seen our young women going to Saudi Arabia, meaning as much as is happening here in our country, even young women who are going to look for job opportunities outside of our country, they are also going through violence. It means this is an urgent matter that needs to be dealt with. It's a matter that needs to be resourced. It's a matter that all of us, from our family level, to our community level, to our county level, to our national level, we need to really look into it and ensure that we put everything that is required to be able to address issues of gender-based violence in our country.
Right, of course. It is actually estimated that it's around 736 million women who have experienced violence. But Jacqueline, I just want to bring you in and just talk about, of course, what we've been talking about, stigma and secrecy. Why do you think that's there in the first place?
I think if you look at the African woman, they're socialized not to talk when they go through violence. It's always something that you should keep under the wraps. And again, like you have mentioned, it's fear of stigmatization from the members of the family and then the extended outside the homes. So most of the women will not want to report because they know there's always an aftermath of reporting. Again, if I look at it from the prosecution point of view, most women do not want to go, or victims, survivors of gender-based violence, don't want to go through a tedious legal process. And at the end of it all, there's really nothing to get. So most of them will fear because of what they will go through when it comes to reporting stigma. And then again, beyond stigma, there are other things that come with it. Leaving your home, you have to also lose your job if you have to attend court every day. And then again, you also have to lose family and relationships. So most of the people will always avoid reporting. The survivors will avoid reporting because of that.
Right. Wangeshi, I'd just like to ask you the same thing, of course, because you do deal with such cases. What are your thoughts on stigmatization, of course, on gender-based violence?
Seen in having worked with women who are survivors of violence, I think they are drivers of violence in our community, and one of them is that I think there is a lot of normalization that this is a norm within our community, and that's why if domestic violence does happen, a lot of people will be encouraged. This is a family matter. Let it be resolved at the family level. We have also seen our cultural practices, female genital mutilation in some parts of our country, and there are a number of counties, more than 20 counties in our country, that practice female genital mutilation. What happens? That's a rite of passage, and every girl then who doesn't go through that process then feels that they are not part and parcel of that community. And yet, when we come to the national laws, is that female genital mutilation is actually outlawed in our country. And when you look at other practices, if you go to in the coast region, things like disco matanga, and I'm very, very unfortunate to see the other day that disco matanga has been lifted, the ban has been lifted. For me, that was really shocking, because if this is where our young girls are being violated, there was a reason behind that to be put and really stop the disco matanga happening, because when the young girls go there, then where they are being violated. And then we have a crisis around teenage pregnancy. And teenage pregnancy, we just need to call it what it is defilement. Our country has outlawed again defilement. Young girls should not be violated. Lack of opportunities, and I said this before, lack of opportunities again put young women in very, very vulnerable positions, because they have to depend with somebody, and that somebody happens to be, some of them happen to be a perpetrator. We have seen our girls going to Saudi Arabia and other Arab countries, again putting them, they're looking for jobs because there are no opportunities here, or the opportunities are scarce here, and when they go there, then they are violated. So when you put all that together, these are the drivers of violence, and therefore we must be able to get to the root of them and really be able to address at the root even as we go up.
Right. Just before we get into details about the drivers, of course, of gender-based violence, I just want to talk to the gentleman here. Earlier on today, I was trying to get a male survivor of gender-based violence. We do know that it's not only one gender. Of course, also men go through it. But it was a bit difficult to get a man to talk about, what he has gone through. Why do you think that's the case, Anders?
We've just heard how hard it is for people to tell their stories, and there is a lot of stigmatization around gender-based violence, rape, and so on. And I think that today, if you are a victim of violence, rape, male rape, other abuses, it's an attack on your manhood in a very deep sense. So what we see is that young men who have been subjected to that, they have an even harder time coming out, speaking about it, being open about it. And unfortunately, if it's not reported, if people are not willing to go to a counselor, talk about it, will not be able to bring it out in the open. So it's something very, very deep-rooted, but we have to turn that. We have to turn that sharp corner to do away with this.
Right. Josephat, what about you in terms of course, men not being able to talk about some of these issues, of course, the gender-based violence? What are your thoughts on that?
Definitely men are violated as women are. The difference is the numbers. And the vulnerability for women is higher because of the structural issues that's allowed and the historical disadvantages that they suffer. But men are unable to speak about this for many reasons. One, the way we are brought up. Men are brought up, socialized not to speak up about some of the tribulations they go through in society. And violence traditionally has been associated with men, whether when going to war, whether defending territories, and so on. But men suffer repercussions of the same violence, even domestically. But it is easier for men to tolerate violation from other men and by other men and report on it and speak about it. But much difficult for the same men to speak about violations that they undergo with their partners at home. Mm-hmm. That is based on socialization, where men are told, thou shalt not cry like a girl. So the men suffer internally. They are unable to externalize the suffering that they go through. And COVID taught us few lessons about men not reporting. Men reported more during COVID-19 period. If you look at the statistics between March 2020 and July. And one of the areas of reporting was psychological and emotional violence. That is where men reported most. But also sexual violence, not physical violence from their partners. So it is based on the harmful traditional practices that prohibit men from speaking about general suffering, but specifically about gender-based violence against them.
Right. Let's just move on now to, of course, causes and drivers of gender-based violence. Wangeshi, you had mentioned it earlier, but let me just start off with Jacqueline, of course, from where you sit, the Office of the Director of Public Prosecution. In terms of causes of that drive gender-based violence, the numbers are high. What do you think are the causes?
Just to paint the picture before I answer that question, I want to unpack the data for 2021 and 2022. Those 2 years, we filed about 18,352 cases, gender-based violence cases. We are talking of the matters that are already in court. Out of those cases, we have about 11,000, which are defilement, and going down to indecent acts against children. Then again, rape came third. So quite a number of we have quite a number of drivers. One of them, Wangeshi has mentioned, is economic issues. You find situations where one of the partner is not working, or the other, or both of them are not working. There's a lot of frustration in our home setting. So one of them is economic drivers. The other one is harmful traditional practices. FGM is another one that also brings about gender-based violence. Of course, we've seen a lot of fight against FGM. One group resisting FGM or trying to outlaw FGM, do away with FGM, and the other one perpetrating FGM. So that would also be a cause of sex and gender-based violence. Thirdly, again, you're looking at a situation whereby you have a lot of emerging issues in the family. Other than economic, of course, we'll have psychological violence, which is perpetrated because of many reasons. Lack of, respect for women, which brings about psychological violence. Physical violence, again, you have had here, it applies to both male and female. Men being violated, not speaking, and then women again being violated and not speaking, and again women talking about it. So quite a number of drivers: economic, harmful traditional practices. Again, there is also an element of where our ladies go to a third country. Part of it, I can call it racism, also plays into it, as a form of which also encourages sexual and gender-based violence when they go to work in other countries like the Dubai and other countries. So just to mention a few, it's those the ones I mentioned.
Right. Wangeshi, just coming back to you, of course, you had earlier on mentioned a few causes. So now just tell us a bit more details of the causes that you have seen that might be causing, gender-based violence in the country.
I think Jackie has started off this, and one of them I will highlight. I think we have more than 20 counties in the country practicing female genital mutilation. And as I highlighted, this is a cultural practice that has been done for many years, and therefore a lot of girls then being encouraged to go for female genital mutilation in various forms. There are those ones who cut off the clitoris, there are those ones who do a plague. So there are many forms of doing it. And that's what it does then. The next thing is the girls go through early marriages. In fact, let's not call it early marriages. There's nothing known as early marriages. The children marriage, and therefore that should also be it's actually outlawed. When it comes at our whole household level, economic challenges are big drivers of violence. In our toll-free line, and on Monday usually is a big day where we have survivors coming in to our office, and really when you speak to them is that they have been violated, they have been hit at home because they asked for money to buy food at a household level. Very, very practical things. So economic challenges is a big driver of violence at a household level. And then the other thing for me, being a very big driver of violence, is when we come into even the world of work, when we have offices, we have spaces where there is no guidelines around dealing with these issues of sexual harassment, for example. And then young women working in this environment continuously then get harassed in their workspace. In our matatus, going home, coming back to towns and doing every travel that we need to do. Every other time you see women complaining about sexual harassment in our transport. Again, a very big driver, because there is there's a lot of impunity around it, that even if you report, what is the evidence that you're going to produce at a police station for domestic violence? Most of the time, and I must say the police has been the weakest link, because when you report, you are supposed to produce the evidence. You are labored again. You have gone through violence, but you must also produce in that police station the evidence, so that then the matter can go forward to the office of ODP. So a lot of burden is putting into women. So if our institutions are not working and not giving the support to the survivors, then for me that becomes a big one to support survivors.
Right, thank you so much, of course, for just giving us that on the causes. I just want us to take a short commercial break here, but we'll be back with more. Of course, the conversation is on gender-based violence. We have an interesting panel here. We'll be back with more. Stay with us.
Transform Kenya. Empower our nation.